Ian McKelvey.
Getting to speak last or near last in the general debate, Mr Speaker, just re-emphasises the tragic nature of some in this House. And I want to remind the last speaker that he, of course, tried leaving the House for a while and no one wanted him back, so didn't put any new bridges on the West Coast. That didn't work for him. I also want to remind the leader of the Green Party that Kelvin Grove, of course, is very close to my electorate. I can throw a stone at it. There is, in fact, no school in Kelvin Grove, and she was quoting the Kelvin Grove school numbers to the Prime Minister just this afternoon. There is no such school in New Zealand, unfortunately. And I think that's a bit tragic too, Mr Speaker. So I think that when we get up and speak in this House, we need to be pretty clear of our facts. I want to touch on a topic before I get on to the real topic of my speech that the previous speaker spoke about, and that is the MIE report that we visited last night, or listened to last night, as it was presented to quite a group of people from around New Zealand. It was, of course, instigated by John McCarthy, who comes fair out of the middle of my electorate in Owakuni. And he was very pleased to bring that report to the country last night. It did point out some very good points, made some very good points, as the previous speaker said, and I'm sure if those points that were made in the course of that report and all the work that was done in that report, in fact have the value that the previous speaker said, then they will be brought to fruition in due course, probably by the industry, maybe by a government. Mr Speaker, I want to get back to talk about the economy and how the improvements to the economy are making life significantly better for our families in New Zealand. I want to firstly start with interest rates. We've seen interest rates, and I guess a great surprise to some, but interest rates in a position now which are making a significant difference to young families throughout New Zealand, making a difference to business, certainly making a difference in my electorate to the farming community. We've also seen the fuel prices drop significantly in the last few months, making probably a difference of around about $30 a week to the average family. And I know in my case, if I fill up in Levin, I can get my petrol 20 cents a litre cheaper than I can in Wellington. If I fill up in Palmerston North, I can get it cheaper than I can in Sanson, for example, and significantly cheaper as well. So being lucky enough to have to drive down here every week, Mr Speaker, I fill up in Levin as I come past, going both ways. Makes a difference. I want to also talk about ACC, which has taken $130 off the average, off the family car, a significant saving again for the New Zealand families. And finally, in this section, Mr Speaker, I want to very briefly mention the New Zealand dollar, which of course has come off about 10 cents against the US dollar, making a significant difference to most of our exporters. And whilst there might be some threat to us around what's going on in the cross rate with Australia, we certainly are in a good position from that perspective. So all in all, Mr Speaker, the economy is making a significant difference to what's going on in New Zealand and New Zealand families and in rural New Zealand. Very briefly on the dairy prices, which have come off 8% overnight in New Zealand, or the milk price has. And I think when you compare this and look at the recent 1080 scare, I think, Mr Speaker, that just shows the irresponsible nature of the type of activity that have been engaged in there. Also wanted to quickly touch on a demonstration day held by Osprey out in the Hut some 2 weeks ago, where a number of us were fortunate enough to attend, and looking at the benefits of 1080, which have made a massive difference to our preservation of our forests, our nature, the eradication of possums, and of course of TB, which has virtually been cleaned up in New Zealand by the 1080 program. Without the use of this tool, Mr Speaker, we would be in desperate straits from a TB perspective, and certainly our native fauna and wildlife, birds, particularly our native birds, would also be in deep distress. Now, I think we all want to see a time when 1080 has been replaced by some more efficient method, but until that time happens, Mr Speaker, I don't think we have much choice but to continue with it. Thank you, Mr Speaker. I just want to touch quickly on the Northland Field Days, which I attended a couple of weeks ago, and they were pretty successful. I also want to touch on the... And I might make the point also, for the benefit of the New Zealand First speaker who just spoke recently, of course, they were so interested in the Northern electorate, they didn't even stand a candidate there for 4 elections. So it shows the interest they've got. I might also make a point about him, that he himself comes from Carterton, which I guess is about the size, the whole of the Carterton council, of which he was the mayor, is about the size of Kerry, not much bigger. And of course, the number of votes he got in the last election was smaller than the number of votes he got in Carterton. Mr Speaker, very finally, I want to very briefly mention that the Manfield Field Days, of course, of this last week, which were extremely successful, had a crowd of 40,000 through them. Again, families, farmers, people of New Zealand enjoying themselves. Thank you, Mr Speaker.